I'd like to call this meeting to order. Mr. Griffin, would you lead us in a flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sunshine Law Statement, all requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been met for this meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Oradell. Notice of this meeting was filed with the record in Town News and all persons requesting such notice. Mrs. Walker, would you read the mission statement?
The Oradell Public School District is dedicated to the ongoing pursuit of educational excellence through comprehensive, innovative curriculum and instruction. The district is committed to providing opportunities for social, emotional, and academic discovery to foster curiosity, courage, and character. Our goal is to prepare our students to become lifelong learners who are self-directed, resilient, productive, responsible citizens.
Thank you. Roll call.
Mrs. Negum,
Here.
Mr. Griffin,
Here.
Mrs. Levy, Mrs. Norian, Mrs. Shapiro, Mrs. Walker,
Here.
Mr. Walsh,
Here.
Mr. Darian, Mrs. Nichols.
Here, open to the public for agenda items. If you're joining us on Zoom, please raise your digital hand. Not seeing any, we'll move to the superintendent's report.
I'm going to begin my report today with a presentation of the Access for ELL's testing results that occurred last spring. We are required by state law to present any standardized testing that comes down from the state 60 days after we receive those results. While we did not take the NJSLA this spring, 2 state assessments were given. One's called the Dynamic Learning Map, and the other one is the Access for ELL. We do not have any students at Oradell Public School that take the Dynamic Learning Map. It's a test for special education students who can't access the material of the NJSLA. However, we did administer the Access for ELLs test. One thing to know about the Access for ELLs, it's not a New Jersey test. It's part of WIDA, and WIDA is a consortium of 41 states that participate and administer these tests. So when a student enters Oradell Public School, one of the questions that we ask them is, what is their home language? What is the language they speak at home? And that triggers some additional questions that we ask to a parent to identify whether or not they should be tested for entry into the ELL program. We then, every spring, any student who has qualified for that program, whether they have accepted services or not, are administered the Access test. The Access test assesses listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and then we combine those skills to form larger scores. So for example, comprehension can be speaking and reading together. So what these tests really tell us is it does allow us to identify students who are ready to exit the program. However, it also identifies each student's individual strengths and areas to focus on. What you will notice about the Access test is it's a little bit like when anyone else learns a foreign language. So for example, listening and writing often come before, listening and reading often come before writing and speaking. So I know you're not going to be able to see this, you might be able to see it more on your individual, but every domain within the Access test has a rubric. That rubric is specific for every grade. Later today, you'll have the opportunity to approve a new Ell Report Card. That Ell Report Card is directly aligned to these rubrics for every grade. So it tells a parent throughout the year how a student is doing in the areas that they will be assessed on in the spring, specifically listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So these are the number of students that were assessed this past spring or winter. And we had 13 kindergartners, 10 first graders, and 12 students in 2nd through 5th grade. The reason that we lump 2nd through 5th grade together is because we couldn't share any score results if the numbers were too small because it would be identifiable. And that shows you the average overall proficiency level for each of those grades. Now, it's important to know that when a student scores a 4.5, that's when they exit the program. So you'll see that even our students that are in the program, our average score is very close to exiting. And this is our breakdown for each of those grades. I did go back to look at last year, and interestingly, some of our results are actually higher this year than last year. I've had a strong belief that our reading scores overall as a district went up as a result of the pandemic. Students who may not have had time to read previously, that was something they now had time to do. And so moving forward, our ESL teachers have reviewed all of these scores. They have shared all of the scores with parents, because just as we have a time frame for presenting the information, they have a time frame for sharing that information with the parent population. Based on these scores, 10 students have exited the ELL program, and 12 students have entered the program. And that's pretty typical for us. We exit students typically at the end of second grade, and we bring students in typically in kindergarten by the time they're in second grade, they are exiting the program. Do you have any questions specifically about the access testing?
Are there any students that haven't scored the 4.5?
Yes, so if 10 students have scored out, those 10 students of 23, 35, so 25 students did not score a 4.5, so they are still in the ESL program right now, which isn't unusual. Typically, students need more than 1 year to master the English language. Yes, Mr. Griffin? Sorry.
How do the trends look on this over year comparison?
It's the same thing. You start to see first graders being a little bit higher because that's when they're starting to exit out, really. They've had 2 years. And what's really interesting is you're talking about developmental levels that play into the ELL scores as well. And the other piece that as I said earlier, is really interesting to me is what domains are always highest. So listening is always the highest score.
Is it odd that 2 to 5 oral language is lower than K in 1?
Well, think about yourself learning a foreign language. When are you more hesitant or reticent to answer? Typically when you're older, right? So younger students experiment more and are more willing to take risks, so no.
Mrs. Walker?
Ms. Bozios, what's the average number of students, for example, this year, that entered OPS coming directly from another country?
That number is actually, I don't have it specifically, it's actually very low. Most of our ELL speakers are in the country already, and that's why their services are different. So when students take the model test in the beginning of the year, their score dictates what type of services they have. So if they're brand new to the country, they probably have pull-out services 5 days a week. The majority of our students have push-in services, meaning the English language, the ESL teacher is in the classroom supporting them there instead. And right now, I can't think offhand of one student who has 5 days a week of pull-out. So our students are not typically, if they are coming from another country directly, it's often they're a little bit older and they've had English language instruction already.
Right.
Mr. Griffin?
Thank you.
Do you have a sense of, I don't know how you would show this, but thinking about, especially that 2nd to 5th grade, what portion of them have received less than? So like they've come in at like the 2nd or 3rd grade, but I just didn't know if there would be a way to show it where it's like of a percent of the number, like if the kindergartners are 100%, they've received 100% of the services. And then like 1st grade, maybe like 2 of the kids of the 10 came in at 2nd grade, so you would say 80% received 100% of the services. Would there be a way of looking at it that way? Do you have a sense on this?
I wouldn't be able to give that to you, but I can provide it to you in this week's update by just looking at specifically how many years in the program students are. So how many years in the program as a second grader. Because that would tell me if they've been in since kindergarten or if they came in later,
Right.
which I think is what you're asking.
Yeah, and I mean, just to normalize
Yeah,
it, thinking
no.
about that second to fifth grade, just treating it as like 100% of whatever would
Mm-hmm.
be available, so you could still have the same metric.
And if I take the scores off, I also can break it down by grade level. I can't do it with a score there because if there's only one fifth grader, I've identified that student, but I can do it without a score and look at it that way.
Any other questions?
If you've passed by Oradell Public this week, I hope you have noticed our PE teachers in their turkey hats on Memorial Field. It is just one more step towards regaining normalcy at Oradell Public by being able to have the turkey trot once again. Our students completed running today, and it's actually the first year in I can't remember how many that we actually got every student in the school was able to run outside. It always typically starts raining in the middle, and the last day they're running through the hallways instead. So it was great that every student had that experience, and they will begin bringing in food. The Girl Scouts helped and brought in some food this afternoon, and the rest of the community will begin bringing in food tomorrow as well to be delivered to the Center of Food Action. And also in your board update, you know that we had professional development last week on Election Day. It was a really packed day, and I'm really happy with the content of the day. The entire school had an additional informational session about Panorama. Our teachers in grades 4 through 6 had devoted time to be able to look at the Start Strong assessments and see how their students did this fall, and what areas need to be strengthened. And as I spoke to Mrs. Danahy, the incoming River Edge superintendent, I'm also very happy that we were again able to do something in conjunction with River Edge. Both our intervention teachers, formerly known as our basic skills teachers, and our special area teachers worked collaboratively. River Edge received a grant 2 years ago to implement something called tiered systems of support, which is something we are beginning to implement. It's how we move away from a basic skills model, which often the cry was that when you were placed in basic skills, you were in basic skills for your life. And really an intervention model looks at identifying a specific strength or specific weakness in a student and putting all of those students together for a small period of time to strengthen and fill that exact hole. And finally, in your folders today, you will see a copy of ION OPS. It has not gone out to print yet. I would like to send it to the printer on Monday. So if you have any feedback on that, if you could let me know by Friday, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Business Administrator's Report, Mr. Marmora?
I'd just like to report that at last week's Bergen County School Boards Association meeting, 3 of our board members were recognized for their achievements. Mr. Jeremy Griffin for becoming a certified board member, and also Mrs. Rita Walker and Mrs. Dorothy Watson-Nichols for reaching the 10-year milestone as a board member. And with the 10 years, there's pins that were received, so I'll pass them out.
Rita, we're getting something.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very nice.
They're getting cheap. It used to be wood.
Yep.
10 years.
And that concludes my report. Not much.
Thank you for that.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you. You get a certificate, Joe.
Anything else, Mr.
We should-
Marmora? Okay.
You get one.
Minutes, review of October 27th. Any questions or comments, please email Mr. Marmora. We have approval of our meeting minutes from October 13th. Do I have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the meeting of October the 13th.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Walker. Any questions? Call the question.
Mrs. Negum,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Committee reports, buildings and grounds. You want to take that, Mr. Walsh?
Yes. We had a meeting recently. The minutes, the things that we discussed are in the packet. If you have any questions, you can get back to Greg or a member of the committee. Having said that, I'd like to present B1.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Second by Mrs. Walker. Any questions? Mrs.
I have a question.
Deacon?
So, I'm kind of going through the, just related to the air, the air purification system that was put in last year. Do you know if that needs like a maintenance cycle this year, whether it needs like a replacement filter or anything like that, that's a special maintenance, especially for the air filtration system?
Ms.
I don't know
Brosius, you want to take that?
Anyone might know that answer here.
Or
It's
Mr.
my
Marmora?
understanding that the bipolar ionization is self-cleaning.
Okay.
So those specific devices that are in every unit, no. However, we do keep and track regular maintenance on the univents and the Airdells and those other units as well.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other questions? Call the question?
Mrs. Negum?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes?
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes. Curriculum, Mrs. Walker, you want to take that?
Certainly. I'd like to present, well, we had a Zoom meeting last week, and it was on the presentation and the ELLS report card, and it was a very informative meeting. With that, I'd like to present C1.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? Call the question?
Mrs. Negum?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes?
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes. Finance technology, Mr. Griffin, you want to take that?
Sure. I'd like to make a motion for D1 through D4.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? Call the question?
Mrs. Negum?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes?
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes. Delegate report, Mr. Walsh?
I have nothing to report, but I do have a delegates assembly coming up.
Is that Zoom or in person?
There's no resolutions. So,
Is it going to be in person or on Zoom?
it's virtual.
Okay. Personnel, Mrs. Walker?
Yes, thank you. We had a meeting this evening, a Zoom meeting regarding personnel hires. And with that, I'd like to present F1.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? Call the question?
Mrs. Negum?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes?
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes. Policy, Mrs. Negum, do you want to take that? You're on that committee. Any meeting? Did you have any meetings or anything?
Nothing to report at this time. Yes.
Okay. Public relations and task force, Mr. Griffin.
Public relations, there is a copy, I think it's already been stated today, an Oradell Eye on OPS for the board to review, and the intention is to get that out soon, so if everybody can review that and get the comments back to Ms. Posius, that would be appreciated. Please get them to her by Friday. Yeah. And no further update on PR or COVID task force.
At this time, we'll open to the public. If you're joining us through Zoom, please raise your digital hand. Any old or new business from the board? Mrs.
I
Needham?
have- Yeah, I have a question, and this is, just the issue that we had with the bathrooms being, and the TikTok challenge. Is the administration planning to put together a report of some kind on the actual incident and then maybe some remedial measures taken associated with it?
Before you answer, would you like to explain to the board what we're talking about?
Sure. In September, there was put out into the world 10 TikTok challenges, one for each month. So TikTok is a social media platform, and the September challenge was to vandalize a school bathroom. The October challenge was to smack a staff member, and I can't remember November's. Now, what's interesting about that, it is possible that probably the second week of school, we had 2 instances of vandalism in our 6th grade bathroom, but let's define what the vandalism is. It's throwing toilet paper on the ceiling. If you've been at Oradell Public School before, none of those behaviors haven't happened before. And actually, they're not even happening at higher numbers than they've had before, but because of the TikTok challenge, it kind of has raised. So the first time it did happen, we did pull the grade level together to talk to them in the hallway, which is a typical practice when we're not sure an event happens. We don't really know who has caused the event. We just have a grade level family meeting. And that did happen. The second time it happened, we immediately caught the culprit and spoke to his family and had consequences. And the third time, I think, was a 4th grader, and again, we immediately identified the child. Actually, in that case, the child had confessed to his parent, and his parent brought him in and had him tell administration. So in each case, they've been addressed, I believe, appropriately. I think because of the media, it just has become bigger. Anybody who's been around OPS knows that we have toilet paper on our ceilings a lot, because the bathroom's like your unsupervised time where you can experiment a little bit. We have often some urine issues in boys' bathrooms because boys experiment in the bathroom sometimes. Anytime it happens, we do 2 things. We do look at cameras to see if we can figure out the time, and we typically then also become more stringent with our requirements in the classroom where kids have to start signing out, because then that helps us to identify, and that typically stops it every time. Now, I have not heard of another issue recently, but I will check and see if there's anything else and let you know.
Can we just clarify what cameras you're looking at when you say you're looking at cameras regarding bathrooms?
Of course. As we know, we have cameras throughout the hallways of Oradell Public School. There are no cameras in any individual classrooms, and there are no cameras in the bathroom.
Any other old or new business? Mr. Walsh?
Did you say that the kids were allowed, one of the things were the kids were allowed to destroy a bathroom or?
No. It's a TikTok challenge, so sometimes some of our students throw toilet paper on the ceiling. It's the same as always, and they always take care of it. No one's allowed to do anything.
Okay, so it's not a challenge to the students.
No, it's online. So some of our students read it, but it's the same rate that we normally have the toilet paper on the ceiling, percentage-wise.
So it's like cabbage night
Yes,
inside the school.
yes. Any other old or new business?
Sorry, just a follow-up question then. Is someone from the staff or administration actually following or on TikTok, kind of looking for these types of?
Well, the 10 challenges have already been shared, and truthfully, we have a very strong relationship with the Oradell Police Department, and specifically Detective Sergeant Fedorchuk. And as the juvenile detective, he immediately lets us know of anything. We also have a very strong relationship with Riverdale. So when the first event happened at Riverdale, Mr. Pepe reached out to let us know, hey, watch out, and that's kind of how we work collectively together as a community.
Okay, thank you.
Any other old or new business? Well, if not, everyone happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Same to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All right, 7:58.
All right.